2009, a man by the name of James Howells proved himself to be a visionary. He started mining Bitcoin before anyone else had ever heard of it. James managed to stockpile 7,500 Bitcoins when they were just a fraction of a cent per coin. Eventually his girlfriend made him stop. She thought that the computer doing the mining was, quote, getting too noisy. James later ended up throwing the hard drive in the trash, and today this mistake cost him over $400 million.
To get your money, you would need that hard drive.
Yeah, there's a specific file on that hard drive called a wallet file, which the Bitcoin is stored in. And without that file, there is no way of getting the money back because there is no central server that records a log of it.
In 2010, Laszlo Hanyecz bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, or about $35 at the time. It wasn't the first transaction in Bitcoin, but certainly the most widely publicized. Unfortunately today, these delicious pizzas cost him $500 million.
Is it true some people celebrate the anniversary of the day you bought the pizza?
Yeah, May 22nd, Bitcoin Pizza Day, so
It's called Bitcoin Pizza Day?
It is.
It's stories like this that make Bitcoin such a fascinating phenomenon. Its growth and adoption, at least over recent years, has been mind-blowing. But the story of how Bitcoin came to be is just as interesting. Despite Bitcoin's young age when compared to traditional stores of value, the fundamental ideas behind crypto may be older than you think. So the question has to be asked, where did Bitcoin actually come from? Who is the mysterious individual who invented it? Sit back, relax. In this 2-part series, we'll find out.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
For many, Bitcoin is still considered a fad, a Ponzi scheme, something that will disappear as quickly as it materialized. The cryptocurrency has had its fair share of bad reputation through fake crypto frauds such as BitConnect and OneCoin, not to mention payment for narcotics on Silk Road.
What's happening is there's all these copycat cryptocurrencies that are going out there, and there's no regulation on the actual level of Bitcoin itself. You're talking, there's futures regulation, but the underlying asset is completely unregulated. It's a dark market.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity.
But the word is starting to get through that Bitcoin is much more than that. People are starting to look at our economic system with increasing skepticism. Currency is continuously being created. Food prices and bond yields are rising, hinting at inflation. And knowing that the long-term value of all fiat currencies over the last few thousand years has tended towards zero, it's only natural to think that there may be some issues ahead. I've outlined financial problems specifically in my How Money is Created video, which all of you really enjoyed, but it clearly highlights that there's a need for new thinking on the topic. Friedrich Hayek, winner of the 1974 Nobel Prize in Economics, stated the following in 1984. I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government. All we can do is by some sly roundabout way introduce something that they can't stop. End quote. While it's undeniable that Bitcoin is not perfect, it broadly achieves this goal, and as you'll soon see, it can't be stopped. So before we continue, it's probably wise to have a quick primer on Bitcoin. I first talked about Bitcoin on this channel back in 2013, and since then we've done a whole bunch of episodes on Bitcoin and blockchain. But for those that are new, here's a quick summary. When you pay a shop using a bank card, the shop checks with the bank to see if you have money to make the purchase. The bank checks its records, verifies that you have enough money, and deducts that amount from your card. It then updates its records and takes a fee for providing their services. If you wanted to remove the banks from the system, who would you trust to keep the records straight? No altering or cheating. No one would ever trust a single person with that much power, but you may give your trust to a collective group of people, many millions in fact. The main idea is to not have a centralized record of transactions. Many copies of those transactions are distributed across the world. Every owner of each copy records every transaction. In this new model, the shop, instead of checking with the banks, checks with everyone's records to see if you have the money. When the purchase is made, all the record keepers update their records. If an individual transaction record is fraudulent, it doesn't agree with the rest of the copies of the transaction records and gets rejected. this large group of people checking record transactions aren't people at all, but a network of computers. There is no need for third parties such as banks, because the decentralized network keeps itself in check. Amazingly, that means no bans, no server shutdowns, or blocking of payments, because payments occur directly between people. Although transactions can be tracked, they cannot be stopped. So-called miners keep the network running by solving complex equations on their computers. These people mine Bitcoin in chunks called blocks that contain all of the recent transactions. Blocks are kind of like a page in a record-keeping book. The miners receive payment in Bitcoin for their effort, much like mining gold. Also like gold, there's a finite supply of Bitcoin to stop it from being devalued, much like we're currently seeing in fiat currency. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, and the final Bitcoin will be mined in 2140. So what gives Bitcoin its value? In reality, it's just worth what someone's willing to pay for it. So could the price drop to zero? If confidence is lost, yes, it's possible. But regardless, it is a pretty interesting idea. There's an argument to be made that the value of Bitcoin is actually the trust and utility of the Bitcoin network itself. What the price is for that value, no one is sure yet.
So yeah, I think a really useful idea. A blockchain is just a type of database. It's a distributed ledger that in some use cases, like for a banking back office, is kind of like a database upgrade. So massive improvements in efficiency, but probably not that transformative or disruptive. When you take a blockchain, you make it public and decentralized, and then you add money to that, you add a cryptocurrency, then you're looking at something that is that first use case, that offshore banking system, that I think is fundamentally disruptive, and disruptive financially, economically, and even potentially politically.
So how is Bitcoin maintained? Bitcoin is open source, so anyone can edit the code. It's a misconception that the code has stayed the same for the past 10 years. There's maintenance carried out to ensure smooth functioning. This is done through a Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, or BIP. A BIP is just a document that proposes core changes. But to stop someone from inserting some code that says, say, give every Cold Fusion viewer 1,000 Bitcoin, there needs to be 95% consensus across the last 2,000 miners. Basically, it's a digital voting system. On January 3rd, 2009, the first block of Bitcoin was mined. Within this very first block, a special message was written. It read, quote, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks." This gives us a clue to Bitcoin's purpose for existing, a response to a broken financial system. Just 9 days after the first block was mined, the first Bitcoin transaction is completed. It was between Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, and another cryptographic enthusiast, Hal Finney. It was a healthy sum of 10 Bitcoin, worthless at the time as there were no exchanges to determine a price. Satoshi Nakamoto would announce his invention of a new economic system on a cryptography mailing list on July 9th, 2009. Hal Finney would help Satoshi fix bugs and improve security in those early days. While these steps mark Bitcoin's creation and the first instance of application, this is by no means the beginning of Bitcoin's story. For that, we must travel back over 2 decades to the year 1983. In 1983, American cryptographer David Chaum is already experimenting with the idea of electronic cash. He was part of a movement known as the cypherpunks. They were activists who defended the idea of using cryptography and computers as a powerful tool to protect the privacy of individuals. If you were to put it into political terms, they were kind of like digital libertarians. David wanted to create a safer and more anonymous transaction system. His efforts led to the invention of the blind signature protocol, breaking ground on what would become known as the foundations for modern blockchain technology.
I created a concept for how you could use eCash to make your payments, and then the blind signatures could be used to basically prove things about you without revealing who you are. Classic, say if a kid's at a bar and they want to, or somewhere they want to get in, they want to say to prove that they're old enough, or they have a driving license, or they're from a different state or whatever, but they don't want to give their address and all this other stuff. Well, that's what you could do with the credential mechanism.
In the years that followed, David Chaum began building his idea of a workable cryptographic electronic money system, and in 1989 the company DigiCash was formed. A notable employee at DigiCash was cryptographer Nick Szabo. Nick would go on to be influential in the early crypto space, but more on him later.